Day. Signed, Mike Johnson, Speaker of the House of Representatives.
Pursuant to the order of the House on January the 3rd, 2025, the Chair will now recognize members from lists submitted by the majority and minority leader for morning hour debate. The Chair will alternate recognizing between the parties, with the time equally allotted between the parties and each member other than the majority and minority leaders and the minority whip, limited to 5 minutes, but in no event shall debate continue beyond 11:50 a.m. The Chair recognizes the gentleman from Massachusetts, Mr. Lynch.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Massachusetts.
Okay. The Chair recognizes the gentleman from Massachusetts, Mr. Lynch, for 5 minutes.
Good morning, Mr. Speaker, and thank you. Mr. Speaker, as a member of the Subcommittee on the Military and Foreign Affairs, I rise in strong opposition to executive actions taken by the Trump administration to shut down U.S. foreign assistance and undermine America's national security. Over the past 2 decades, I've led multiple bipartisan congressional delegations to Iraq, Afghanistan, Lebanon, Syria, Ukraine, Somalia, and Gaza, as well as other conflict zones. These oversight missions have examined the implementation of U.S. foreign assistance firsthand, precisely because the security and humanitarian aid that we provide to our international partners is critical to advancing U.S. national security and foreign policy priorities around the world. Recent executive actions taken by the Trump administration demonstrate a blatant disregard for the important role that foreign aid serves in keeping America, including American service members who are deployed in these conflict zones, safe. In the first major foreign policy action of his new term, President Trump issued an indiscriminate stop order suspending U.S. foreign assistance for at least 3 months. That includes the suspension of security and military aid to Ukraine, which is entering the 4th year of its fight for independence against the brutal, unlawful invasion ordered by Russian President Vladimir Putin in 2022. Our continued support for Ukraine is vital to the ability of the U.S. and our NATO allies to deter escalating Russian aggression across Europe. The order also freezes aid to Taiwan, which remains the target of Chinese military incursions that threaten peace and stability in a region where nearly 400,000 U.S. military and civil personnel are deployed in support of the U.S. Indo-Pacific Command. To make matters worse, the Trump administration has halted all mine removal programs led by the State Department in more than 125 countries, during oversight visits to Lebanon, Iraq, Afghanistan, and other areas where former battlefields are littered with anti-personnel explosive devices. I've directly observed the dedicated partnership between U.S. agencies and non-governmental organizations such as Halo Trust and the Lebanese Mine Action Center, who work together to remove landmines, cluster munitions, and other ordinances for the safety of local populations and American diplomatic and military personnel. This week, I will be introducing the Global Demining Protection Act, endorsed by Halo Trust, to exempt demining programs from the ongoing ban on foreign aid. Most recently, the Trump administration launched a full-scale attack on USAID, an independent agency duly established and annually funded by Congress. The fundamental mission of this agency and its global workforce of more than 10,000 dedicated employees is to promote stable democracies abroad in the interest of U.S. national security. First, top USAID security officers were removed for rightfully refusing to grant billionaire Elon Musk and his so-called Doge team access to sensitive personnel files and classified systems. Next, President Trump attempted to place all directly hired USAID employees on administrative leave, including those who are deployed overseas. Thankfully, a federal district judge has issued a temporary restraining order preventing the administration from placing employees on leave or evacuating them from overseas assignments. In Mr. Musk's words, USAID is a criminal organization, time for it to die, close quote. Well, the agency that he is desperate to kill without congressional approval is one whose development mission in more than 100 conflict countries are designed to prevent the root causes of global violence and extremism, including famine, civil war, and human rights abuses. That is why the nonpartisan American Foreign Service Association reports that, quote,